Get out! One bag, $40. Find your own way.
You really think you've left me with nothing? Uncle Ray, why are all these cars here?
Your father sent them, Mandla. He told me to bring you home.
He dropped his wife at a homeless shelter with one bag, $40, and 4 words, find your own way. He was certain he'd finally trade her up. She stood quiet as his car disappeared. Minutes later, 6 black SUVs rolled up to the curb. When the first door opened, even she did not understand what was happening until she saw who stepped out. Some folks throw a person away with both hands and never once look at what they were holding, and the world only learns her worth after she's already gone. Stay with me to the end of this one. By the time those 6 cars emptied out on Ellsworth Street, every soul watching knew they had misjudged the wrong woman. The heat came off the Atlanta pavement. In waves the afternoon, a gray sedan rolled up outside a rescue mission on Ellsworth Street. Old men leaned into the chain fence, fanning their necks. A little boy dragged a stick along the rails. Nobody looked twice at the car. Not yet. Inside it, Mandla sat with her hands folded in her lap, her back straight, her eyes forward, like a woman waiting for a church service to start. Her husband would not meet her eyes. Xavier threw the car into park, reached over the seat, and hauled out a single bag. He carried it around the front, dropped it on the sidewalk, and nudged it over with his shoe until it toppled on its side. Get out, he said. She turned her head toward him. She did not argue. She stepped down into the heat and stood beside the bag that held what was left of her life. Xavier dug in his pocket, counted a few bills, folded them once, and pressed them into her palm. That's more than you walked in with, he said. From the back seat, his mother leaned into the light. Gloria had a face cut by hard years and a mouth that had never once softened for the woman her son married. I buried 2 men with empty pockets. I know dead weight when I see it. And I saw you coming a mile off, child. And beside her, Xavier's sister turned her phone sideways. Chantel was grinning. Say something for the people, sis. The little red dot is blinking. Go on. You always did love a sad face on you. And in the front passenger seat, the one that had been Mandla's for 6 years, sat a woman she had met only twice. Whitney did not lower her sunglasses. She checked her lipstick in the visor mirror, snapped it shut, and spoke without turning around. Don't drag this out, Xavier. Her voice was flat and level, a woman reading off a schedule. Sentiment is the priciest thing a man can carry. Set it down and drive. 3 of them, his blood, his new prize, and the man who had sworn to keep her. 3 blades one afternoon, and not one hand shook when they cut. You got nothing to say? Xavier pushed, almost angry that she would not break in front of him. 6 years, and you can't even fight for it. She looked at him a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice came out low and steady, no crack in it. You'll remember this day, Xavier, not for what you did to me, but for who you decided to be while you did it. He laughed once, short and mean, and climbed back behind the wheel. The engine turned, the tires spat grit off the asphalt. The gray sedan pulled down the street, rounded the corner, and slipped out of sight. Mandla did not cry. Her hand went to the pocket of her plain blue dress and closed around a small brass key on a frayed ribbon. She had worn it every day for over 20 years. She held it now the way a person holds a hand in a hospital hallway. A woman came out onto the shelter steps, drying her hands on a dish towel. She was older, heavy-set, with eyes that had watched 1,000 bad days walk up that sidewalk. She took in Mandla's shoes, her posture, the strange composure on her. Baby, she said gently, you don't stand like somebody who belongs out here. Mandla gave her a small, tired smile. I don't, she said. Far down the block, near the corner where the gray car had vanished, a dark car sat idling in a strip of shade. It had been there the whole time. Mandla let her eyes rest on it for one breath, then looked away. She had glimpsed a car like that before, more than once, always on her worst days. She had never let herself wonder whose it was. To understand why, you have to leave that street corner and go back, way back, before Xavier, before any of them ever learned her name. 20 years earlier, on the south side of the city, there was a brick house with a crooked mailbox and a screen door that clapped like a gunshot in the wind. That was where Mandla grew up, raised by her father alone. His name was Elias. To the neighbors, he was a soft-spoken man in a tired sedan who kept his grass cut and never bragged on a thing. He traveled a lot. He would kiss her forehead with a suitcase in his hand and say, "I always come back to you, baby girl." And he always did. He never came home with gifts. He came home with himself. He would sit on those front steps in the evening cool and teach her how to see people. "Watch how a man treats folks who can't do a thing for him," he told her once, nodding toward a neighbor helping an old woman up her stairs. Right there, that's who a man really is. The rest is just a costume he puts on for company. He had a way of saying a thing once and letting it sink in, then never repeating it, so you carried it like it was your own. One winter he came home near midnight, snow melting on his shoulders, dead on his feet. Mandla was supposed to be asleep. She had a drawing due for school and had ruined 3 tries at it, and she was crying softly in the kitchen so he wouldn't hear. He heard. He didn't send her to bed. He sat down, pulled the pencil out of her little fist, and helped her draw a house. He made the front doorway too wide for the walls. "Daddy, that opening's too big," she laughed, wiping her face. "A house is only as good as how wide it'll open for a stranger," he said. "You'll understand that one day, long after I'm gone." She thought it was just a tired man being silly. She was 8. She would not understand it for 30 years. There were things she only pieced together much later, once she knew the truth of him. The month the roof caved in over her bedroom, a crew of strangers fixed it in a single day and would not leave a bill or a name. The winter her knee needed surgery, the specialist 3 states away somehow had an opening the very week she called, and the bill came to almost nothing. Elias never mentioned any of it. He would come home, hang his hat on the hook by the kitchen window, and ask her what she had learned that day, as though the world simply bent kindly around good people. She believed that about the world for years, because he made sure she never once saw the hand doing the bending. That same year, on a night she never forgot, he pressed something small and cool into her palm, a brass key on a ribbon. She turned it over, confused. It looked like it fit nothing worth locking. "That opens the only door that matters," he said. "Which one, Daddy?" He smiled, and for a second, the smile carried something heavy she was too young to name. "One day, this world is going to try to lock you out of everything you are. When it does, you hold this, and you remember whose child you are. You hear me? Whose child?" She wore it through grade school, through her first job answering phones at a clinic. Through the night, she met a fast-talking, wide, grinning young man named Xavier, who made her sides ache from laughing. When she married him, she took his name and set her father's aside without a second thought. She wanted a man to love her for her own heart, not for anything her hand could give him. On her wedding morning, Elias held both her hands and would not quite meet her eyes. "I won't be sitting in that front row the way you want me to," he said, his own eyes wet. "But I'll be closer than you think. I always have been, baby girl. Closer than you'll ever know." She thought it was a father's nerves. She thought it was a man learning to let go. She had no idea how many rooms away he would keep watch for the rest of her life. She had no idea that a quiet name can carry a loud fortune, and that hers had been made small on purpose. For a while the marriage was good. Then the phone began to run the house. Xavier built and flipped properties, and from the street the business looked like it was climbing. Behind the walls it was drowning. Loans stacked on loans, past due notices shoved in a drawer he made sure his wife never opened. She opened it. She said nothing. She picked up extra shifts and put out the fires he lit, the way she had always carried the people she loved. Then at a builder's banquet, he met Whitney. Her family ran one of the biggest development firms in the state, and she wanted the city contracts and connections his company held on paper. She took one look at the fear behind his smile and knew exactly how to open him. "You're wasted where you are," she told him over dinner, turning her glass in slow circles. "I've watched men like you my whole life. You've got the hunger. You just married the wrong scenery." She let that land. "I don't buy houses, Xavier. I buy the ground they sit on. The only question is whether you're standing on the right ground or whether you're an anchor tied to the wrong one." Anchor. It was almost the word his mother had used. Deadweight. Maybe it was chance. Maybe Whitney had done her homework and knew which bruise to lean on. He never once wondered. He just felt tall for the first time in years, and he wanted to feel tall again. His family leaned right along with her. And here is what made it cut so deep. When Chantel was put out of her apartment, it was Mandla who covered 3 months of her rent and never brought it up again. When Gloria's chest pains landed her in a hospital bed, it was Mandla who slept folded into the visitor's chair for a week, while Gloria's own son forgot to call. None of it bought her a thing. At a Sunday dinner, over a roast Mandla had cooked, Gloria set down her fork like she was setting down a verdict. "You always thought you were better than us," Gloria said, that little church voice watching everybody over the rim of her cup. "My son needs a wife who lifts him up in a room, not one who sits in the corner and judges it." "I never judged anybody, Mama Gloria," said Mandla softly. "I just paid attention." "Paid?" Chantel snorted and leaned in, cruel and delighted. "There go that word again. You think a couple rent checks bought you a chair at this table? You were always just the help who married up, and now my brother's finally waking up to it." Mandla looked at the sister whose bed she had kept off the street and saw not one flicker of shame in her. And across the table the man who had promised to stand between her and the whole world studied his plate and said nothing at all. His silence was the loudest voice in that room. That was the exact moment she understood the house was already gone. She simply hadn't been handed the notice yet. It came on a Tuesday. Xavier slid a thick stack of papers across the same kitchen table where her father once taught her about water and accounts. "Transfers, just a formality," he said, eyes on the wood. "So Whitney's firm can come in clean." She read every page. She was not the fool they had all decided she was. On the last one, she saw it plain. She would be signing away the savings she had scraped together over 6 long years. A full year's wages, gone with one stroke of a pen, funneled into a deal that left her name on nothing. She set the pen down. "If you sign this, you're not just handing that woman your business, you're handing her you. Her name is Whitney," he snapped. "And she's the only person left on this earth who still believes in me." She signed, not because she was weak, but because she finally understood that a man who has already decided to leave will read every act of love as a trick. She had one lesson left, and she needed him to teach it to her all the way to the bottom. That night, she knocked on the guest room where he had slept for weeks. "Xavier, whatever they told you I didn't do it. I only ever wanted you to win." Her voice had thinned to a thread. "That's all. That is all I ever wanted from you." From the other side came 2 words. "Save it." She stood in the dark hall with her palm flat against the wood until she heard the bed creak as he turned away from her voice. And then Mandla broke. She slid down the hallway wall to the floor, pressed the brass key hard to her mouth, and cried the way she never let anyone see, in ragged silent heaves that folded her all the way over her own knees. "Daddy, I don't know how to do this by myself." She whispered it to the key, to the dark, to a father she believed was 3 cities away. "I don't know how." The house gave her nothing back. On the nightstand, a phone she had ignored for 2 days lit up with a number she did not recognize, buzzed twice, and went dark. She stayed on that floor a long time. When she finally stood, something in her had gone level and cool. She washed her face. She packed one bag. By morning, she was composed in a way that frightened everyone who knew her, because they couldn't tell if she had given up or if she was simply done waiting. 2 weeks later, Xavier drove her to Ellsworth Street. Now we are back on that blazing stretch, and the gray sedan has just rounded the corner. But it did not get far. It caught the red light at the top of the block, and there it sat, all 4 of them inside, when the street behind them began to change. Chantel noticed first. "Ooh." She raised her phone again. "Xavier, look." A black SUV turned onto Ellsworth, polished, bright enough to fling the sun back at you. Then a second, then a third. 6 of them in a slow, heavy line, filling the road from gutter to gutter, rolling right past the gray sedan at the light, and easing to a stop in front of the very mission Xavier had just left his wife at. The whole street fell quiet. Old men rose off the fence. A woman on a stoop pressed a hand over her mouth. A dozen phones came up out of a dozen pockets, because a block like that one knows in its bones that when 6 machines like those roll in together, somebody's whole life is about to turn over. The doors did not fly open. They swung wide, slow, the way they move when the people behind them are in no hurry and answer to no one alive. Men in dark suits stepped out and stood at attention along the line. From the middle vehicle came an older man, silver-haired in a plain and perfect suit. Carrying a cane, he did not lean on. He crossed straight to Mandla, and in front of the entire street, that powerful old man lowered his head and bowed to the woman with one bag at her feet. "Miss Vaughn," he said. The name landed on the block like a stone dropped in a well. At the corner inside the gray car, Xavier's hand went white on the wheel. "Vaughn." Chantel's grin was gone. The phone drifted down in her fingers. Xavier, that's not. Put the window up, Gloria said, sharp and sudden. Put it up now. Nobody moved. They watched. Miss Vaughn, the old man said again, softer, and now his voice cracked clean down the middle. Forgive me. I am so sorry it took us this long to reach you. Mandla's face did not fill with shock or joy. It settled the way a face settles when the last piece of a long and cruel puzzle slides home. Uncle Ray, she breathed. She had known him since she was barefoot in that brick house. He had run everything her father built. Your daddy built more than you were ever allowed to see, child, Ray said. He hid it on purpose, raised you among folks who'd never once look at you and see a price tag. He drew a slow breath, and his voice thickened. What that man left behind could buy this whole block, the building at your back, and every bank that ever turned its nose up at your husband, and never feel the dent. At the corner, Whitney slid her sunglasses off. For the first time all afternoon, she was doing arithmetic, and she did not like the sum. But Mandla was not looking at the cars, or the crowd, or the crumbling faces at the light. She was looking at the tears in Ray's eyes, and she already knew that a procession like this does not roll out for good news. Where is he? She said. It wasn't a question. Her voice had already begun to fold. Ray's chin trembled. This morning, in his sleep. Peaceful. Mandla, I swear to you it was. His last clear words were, go and get my daughter today. Don't you make her wait one more hour. He reached into his coat and drew out a single folded page in handwriting she knew better than her own. He wrote you this last week, almost like he knew what was coming. There it was, the true cost of the whole terrible day. On the same morning her husband threw her onto a curb like something spoiled. The one man who had loved her since her first breath had slipped out of the world in his sleep. She had become powerful and completely alone inside the same hour. A quiet name can carry a loud fortune, but it can carry a heavy grief just the same. And now she held both, standing on a sidewalk with a dead man's letter in her hand. She did not open it there. She pressed it to her chest, laid the brass key on top of it, and for the first time all day, the tears came. Not loud, just steady and honest, sliding down her face while the whole street watched. He never stopped watching over you, Ray whispered. Those dark cars you'd catch at the edge of your eye on your hardest days. That was him, child, every single time. For one moment her knees nearly gave. She caught the old man's arm, and he held her up without being asked, the way her father would have. Then she straightened. She dried her face with the flat of her hand once, and she stopped crying, not because the grief had passed, but because she had decided the street would not get the rest of it. Whatever was breaking in her that day, she would break it in private, the way she always had. At the corner, the passenger side of the gray sedan opened. Xavier stepped halfway into the street. Mandla. His voice broke across the block. Mandla, wait. She turned her head toward the sound of the man she had married. She looked at him one long second. Then she turned back to Ray as if a stranger had called the wrong name. The crowd had turned too. Dozens of faces and phones swinging from the woman being honored to the man who had left her. And Xavier felt every one of them land on him at once. He stood pinned in the street, exposed to the whole block. The man who threw away a queen because he could not read a plain blue dress. In the back of the sedan, Gloria had gone the color of ash, her hand pressed flat to the glass, as if she could shove the whole scene back around the corner. Chantel's phone was recording, forgotten in her fist, her mouth open on a laugh that never came out. The woman they had called dead weight was being helped into that car like something precious, and she had not raised her voice to a single one of them to do it. Take me home, Uncle Ray, she said. To Daddy's house. Nowhere else. She stepped up into the car. Before it shut, she spoke once more, low, to the street and to the man frozen at the light. He told me to find my own way. Then it closed with a heavy final sound, and the 6 cars pulled off the block as slow and solemn as they had come. Xavier stood alone in the middle of Ellsworth Street long after the last tail light was gone. His mother called his name from the car. He did not hear her. Inside the lead car, Mandla finally unfolded the letter with shaking hands. She read only the first line before she had to press it back to her chest. By the time you read this, they will have shown you exactly who they are. It began in her father's careful hand. Good. Now, let your old man show you who you are. Ray reached across the seat and held her hand the way he had when she was a barefoot girl, and the city that had thrown her out that morning slid past the tinted glass, growing smaller and smaller behind her. The story broke within days. Elias Vaughn, a man almost nobody had ever heard speak, had died one of the richest men in the country, and his only child, his sole heir, was the woman the world had known until that week as Xavier's soon-to-be ex-wife. Whitney found out mid-toast in a restaurant, celebrating the very deal that would have folded Xavier's dying company into her family's firm. Her phone lit first, then his. Then it seemed every phone in the room at once. She read the headline one time. Xavier watched the blood leave her face, then watched something colder move in behind her eyes. "That's your wife?" she said. It was the only time he ever heard fear in her, and it lasted exactly 1 second before the arithmetic came back. She folded her napkin and stood. "Sit down," he said. "We can fix this. You and me." "There is no you and me," she said, flat and final. "There was a deal. The deal is dead." She looked at him with something close to pity. "You were a door, Xavier. I don't marry doors. I walk through them." She walked out that night believing she had gotten clean away. She was wrong, and it took months to show. That clip from Ellsworth went everywhere. And in it, one woman sat checking her lipstick while a wife was thrown out like trash. The internet learned her name. Her family, who prized their reputation above their own blood, could not stand to be tied to the coldest face in a video the whole country had watched. The firm that was supposed to be hers announced a new direction and a new heir, and it was not Whitney. They found her months on, at a charity gala she used to run, standing alone by the tall windows with a full glass she never drank, watching a room of people she had spent a lifetime collecting turn their backs one at a time. A young reporter asked her kindly whether she had any regrets. Whitney gave her that flat, perfect smile. "Regret is like sentiment," she said. "Too expensive to keep." But her hand shook when she raised the glass. For the first time anyone could recall, she had come to a party with no one waiting for her to arrive, and no one who would notice when she slipped out. She had spent her whole life buying the ground beneath other people's feet, and she ended up the only soul standing on hers. That was Whitney's ruin. Not a courtroom, a quiet room full of people, and not one of them looking her way. Somebody who had known her a long time said the part that stayed with them was her face at the end of that night. The way she lingered at the glass longer than she needed to, studying her own reflection, like she was trying to place a stranger, before she set the untouched drink down on the sill and walked out into the dark alone. Gloria and Chantel did not slip away clean either, and their fall came straight out of their own hands. That video belonged to Chantel. She had filmed it, laughed through it, passed it around before anyone knew who the woman being thrown out really was. When the truth broke, the world watched a mother and a sister mock a grieving daughter for sport. The pews around them emptied. Old friends stopped answering. The neighbors who used to wave found somewhere else to look. Chantel came to Mandla once near the end of that year, at the tall glass tower downtown where her father's people worked. She had rehearsed something gentle. It came out as something else. "You could have told us who you were," she said, tears already running. "You let us make fools of ourselves, after everything this family did for you." Mandla studied the sister whose rent she had paid, whose cruelty she had swallowed for 6 years, and did not raise her voice. "You had it backwards your whole life," she said. "I never needed this family to do a thing for me. I only ever wanted to belong to it. That was the one thing any of you had that I couldn't buy, and it was the one thing you were too small to give. You spent it on a video for strangers." Chantel had no answer. She was walked back to the elevator. Xavier came last of all. Not to Ellsworth Street, of course. That woman had died out there on the pavement. He came to the tower and waited 3 hours in the lobby before she agreed to see him. When they brought him up, Mandla stood at the window with the whole city small beneath her, in black, still grieving a father the world had only just discovered. She turned, and he searched her face for hatred and found none at all. That emptiness was what finally broke him. "I know how this looks," he started. His hands were shaking. "I know you think I came here about the, didn't you?" "No." The word came out ragged. "God help me, no." He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. "I keep thinking about the way you used to laugh. First month we were married, the power went out, and we sat on the kitchen floor eating cereal by a flashlight, and you laughed so hard you started crying. And I thought, I will never be poor again as long as I've got that sound in the house." His voice came apart. "I had a woman who slept in a hospital chair for my mother, who kept my sister off the street, who read every one of those past due notices and never shamed me once. You left the porch light on for me every night, no matter how late I dragged in, and I never once said thank you. I thought that light would just always be there. And then I stood on a sidewalk and told the woman who lit it to go find her own way. Mandla said nothing. She let him stand in it. Everybody keeps telling me I lost a fortune, he whispered. That's not what wakes me up at 3 in the morning. It's the quiet. It's the empty side of the bed. It's knowing there was one person alive who would have held on to me through anything, and I handed her to strangers because a woman in dark glasses made me feel tall. He finally looked up. I don't want anything from you. I came to say it to your face. I'm sorry, not for what I lost, for what I did to you. Mandla let the silence sit a long moment. Then she crossed to the desk, lifted a single sheet of paper, and held it out. He read it twice before he understood. It was a release. Every debt his company carried, forgiven, wiped clean. Why, he breathed. Because my father taught me you can tell exactly who a person is by how they treat someone who can do nothing for them. You forgot that. I never will. So understand me. This is not for you. I'm doing it so that when I look in the mirror, I still see his daughter looking back. He nodded, undone. You're free, she said. You owe no one. But hear me, because it's the last time you'll ever hear my voice. I can open my hand to you. I will never open my heart again. Not to you, not to anyone, not all the way. That's what you closed on Ellsworth Street. You didn't only shut me out that afternoon. You shut something in me for good. That was her scar, and it was real. She could forgive the man who left her standing on that pavement. She could never again unlearn that the people closest to her heart could smile at her over breakfast and hand her to strangers by dark. She would carry it the rest of her days, an open hand and a guarded heart. And it was the one thing all her father left her could never buy back. Xavier walked out of that tower with empty pockets, and stranger still, no anger left in him, carrying only the sound of a woman laughing in a dark kitchen. That sound followed him the rest of his life, into every silent room he ever lived in alone. The months rolled on, and the noise died down, and then Mandla did the thing nobody in that world of glass towers expected an heir to do. She went home, not behind an iron gate on the north side, back to the brick house on the south side, with the crooked mailbox and the porch screen that clapped in the wind. She could have bought any palace on the map. She chose the little house where a tired man once drew a doorway too wide on purpose. She kept what her father left and ran it the way he had, out of sight, giving away far more than she ever touched. The first thing she did was buy the shelter on Ellsworth Street and set her father's name in plain letters across the front. The woman who had once told her she didn't belong out there ran the front desk now, in a building with heat that worked and beds that were clean, and never once learned that the calm stranger from that afternoon had signed every page that saved it. One gray day alone in the brick house, she finally used the key. She had never known what it had opened. Going slowly through her father's study, she found in the back of a closet a small wooden door she had walked past 1,000 times as a child. The brass key slid in and turned like it had been oiled and waiting for her all her life. There was no gold behind it, no secret riches, only a small room, every wall covered in photographs. Photographs of her, every year of her life. School plays, her graduation gown, a grainy faraway shot of her own wedding day, taken through a car window from clear across the street. Years and years of a father watching his only child from a careful distance, so she could grow up free of the weight he carried alone. There was a shot of her first morning at the clinic, proud in a cheap new blouse. A blurry one of her at 19, crying on a bus bench over a boy whose name she could no longer even recall, and taped beneath it in his pencil hand 3 words, I sat in the car. A whole life she thought she had walked through by herself, and on every step of it, at the edge of every frame, the shadow of a man who never once let her feel him there. On the far wall, framed by itself, hung a note in his hand. The only door that matters is the one you keep open for the people this world has locked out. That is all a fortune was ever good for. Everything else a man wears is a costume. I love you, baby girl. Whatever they take from you, and they will take plenty, they can never take whose child you are. She lowered herself to the floor of that little room, surrounded on every side by every year of a love she never knew was keeping watch, and she stayed down there a long, long time. Not the woman they threw away, not the heir in the glass tower, just a daughter finally home, holding the one thing no person had ever managed to take from her. She never married again. She kept an open hand to the whole city and a careful heart behind that wide entrance her father had taught her to build, and she made her peace with both. Some evenings she sat on those front steps where he used to sit, turning the brass key in her fingers, while the light went gold over the street. If you had passed by, you'd have seen only a woman alone at rest, worth more than the block she sat on, wanting nothing the block could ever sell her. So before you go, hold on to this the next time you hear the world tell somebody they are nothing. What Mandla lost on Ellsworth Street was never about the money, and what she found in the end had no price tag at all. It was who loved her, who didn't, and who had been watching over her the whole time. If that reached something in you today, pass it to one person who needs to hear it. Subscribe so the next story finds its way to you. And down in the comments, tell me the one thing you would have said if you had been standing on that curb the moment those 6 cars opened. Yours just might be the story we sit down and tell next.